Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of Topical Ramble. And in this episode I want to talk about how the games industry has changed in a more negative type of way. Now this isn't a video that is just going to be completely having a go at publishers and developers and gamers and what have you. That's not what it's about. I want to deal with something quite specific, and it's something that's come to my attention more and more over the past few weeks. And that has been, when you buy a video game, you install the game, you install the update, and off you go. Now occasionally the game will need patching, as we all know. That's a caveat of modern day gaming. Games are released and they're not finished. They're released in various stages of being broken. The idea is because now, accountants and investors run games companies, and they dictate when the game gets released as opposed to when it's actually ready to be released. Patches, updates, they're all par for the course now, and I don't foresee that changing for the foreseeable future. I mean, the entire architecture of these next-gen games consoles has been built around that. It's facilitated game development to become more slipshod. It's facilitated games to be released in broken states. I mean, when you actually look at PC gaming, for example, with the whole Steam Greenlight, I mean, that essentially is putting games out there that are broken. Maybe not the actual Greenlight, but what they call early access, should I say. And that's now actually come to the Xbox One as well, which is essentially saying, pay us money for a game. It isn't finished. It's fundamentally broken in many cases, and we'll get round to fixing it at some point. But we have your money. It's a way of getting the payment up front. You get an early access beta, if you're lucky, broken version of a game, and they'll fix it whenever. And now this is spreading to games consoles. It used to be something that was exclusively to PCs. And with Microsoft's announcement, I think it was E3 last year, that the early access is coming there, you're going to see it spread to games consoles. It's a hideous way of making games, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't care what anybody says. You're paying money for something that's broken, and there are no guarantees, by the way, that the game will ever be fixed. There are no guarantees about that. So once you've paid your money, you get what you've got. Your hope is then that they will actually fix the game and make it at all playable, though there is no guarantee of that. So you're speculating. They call it early access. You're basically funding the game's development in addition to actually buying the game. So it's another way of double dip. And if they choose, by the way, to abandon the project or to change it altogether, tough shit. Now, that's one element that I wanted to discuss. That's out of the way. I think it's a ridiculous thing. I think that, originally I can see why people did it. It gives you early access to a game, and plus it helps finance the development of a game that perhaps would allow more indie games to come into existence in a better quality than they would do if they were just being developed by, one man and his dog, without the ability to do that. That was the theory, but we've actually, as usual, these things get abused by people who don't give a rat's arse. They're just out there to make a quick buck. You look at the Steam store, and it's replete with games that are like that. The consoles tended, because of their ecosystem, the consoles tended to be immune to that type of thing. In the past, you developed a game, you released a game, that was it. The last generation, when consoles became more connected online, I know that came in with the Xbox and PlayStation 2 GameCube era. It sort of increased in its broad market appeal. Obviously the Dreamcast was released with the whole thing, it can connect online and all of that. I'm not suggesting that the Xbox One, PlayStation 2 generation was the first, but it was the first time it took a big step. Like Xbox Live, more than any other, with the original Xbox, showed that online gaming, a paid-for online gaming subscription on games consoles, was a viable thing. that you didn't need a PC to sort of oversee things. That a console with its own OS system was capable of doing things that previously people just didn't think was possible. When you went into the 360 PS3 generation, it went into overdrive, and again Xbox Live led the way. PlayStation had its free online service. It was a little bit dodgy, but the important thing to note was online connection with games consoles started to become more and more important, and you started to see a shift in the way that games were developed. Games were being developed last gen. Suddenly, they weren't being made to a, shall we say, finished quality state. You were seeing a lot of games that were coming out that were broken, that needed patching, had performance issues, had bugs, had crashes, you name it. You started to see more of that. Now, to some extent, you can say, well, those games started to become more complex. Games on the PS3 and the Xbox 360 took quite a giant leap away from the traditional standard way of games coming out on consoles. They started to move closer towards their PC counterparts as games consoles started to make this shift away from something that was often viewed as being a cheap, affordable, quick fix gaming to something that was more involved. So games console games started to become similar to PC games in the fact that they needed patching for performance issues. Some people out there might say, well, what's wrong with that? That's fine. But there really shouldn't be a need for that, because games consoles are a locked down piece of hardware. Like, no matter which games console you have, if you've got a PlayStation 3, yeah, one might have a larger hard drive, one might have a few more USB ports depending on which version you get, but the basic architecture of that console is the same right across the board. They're all built around the same specifications right across the board, whereas PC patching games was kind of understandable because every PC could be different. One might have one sound card, one might have another sound card, one might have a more powerful graphics processor, the other one might not. So patching games to work on an almost infinite number of variables was understandable. With games consoles, that's not the case. When a games console game needs patching, it's down to one simple thing. There's not been enough QA. There's not been enough testing. Bugs that should have been found haven't been found. Now, QA costs money because QA can hold up a game's release. And in the past, when there was no way of actually patching games, if a game-breaking bug was shipped, that was it. It was out there and that was it. They might re-release the game at some later date with a fix for it. But by and large, there was no way to fix it. You couldn't fix bugs on the Mega Drive games. You couldn't fix bugs on PlayStation 1 games. You couldn't fix bugs on those type of ecosystems. And even with the Xbox and PlayStation 2 generation, because still the majority of gamers didn't have those consoles connected online, there was still a huge onus on actually making sure that those games worked as bug-free and had the most optimal performance as possible. What we've seen is a quantum shift away from that now, with this, especially in this generation. This generation has been the worst for releasing broken games. And again, people will try to defend it. They'll say, well, games now are more complex, they're more involved. Not really. I mean, the games now look better than the last gen. But as far as complexity, it's not quite the quantum leap as it was from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3 or Xbox to Xbox 360. These people have had 10 years to figure this out. So there isn't actually an excuse aside from the fact that they're rushing games out to meet impossible release days. They're truncating the development time, especially when it comes to the testing time, because like I said, that can hold a game's release up. If bugs are found, everything stops. Game has to go back to the development team. They have to fix it. It has to be tested. Sometimes fixes create other bugs in the code, and that has to be fixed. It can become quite a big cycle to iron out the game and get it into a workable state. But because of the way that the games industry has gone now, and because people, the games industry is out there saying, oh, well, most people now have got games connected online, blah, 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 we're starting to see this idea that you can release games and they're broken, and people have accepted it. They complain, but they've accepted it. And then we see the rare issues where game patches actually break a game, where a game actually works okay. We saw it with Mad Max, where they patched a game to fix something that actually completely broke it, which is just that's just inept game development on the grand scale. But there's something else that's happened, and something that I find is even more intolerant than the releasing of broken games, and this all comes down to when patches are being shipped for games. And this is the main thrust of this video. What I noticed was when Call of Duty, Activision, whoever it is who's developed the game, with it Treyarch or Infinity Ward, whoever, release maps, my game updates, and it's usually quite a few gigabyte download. And I started to notice this pattern, and I started to think, well, this is odd, because you don't normally wait for the release of a set of maps to patch a game. Normally what you would do is you would patch the game as soon as you were able to fix it. And then I investigated a little bit more with the new map release that came out for Black Ops 3. The patch actually contained the data for the maps. So even though I hadn't purchased a season pass, even though I hadn't purchased the maps, they were being downloaded to my PlayStation 4 automatically. Now, what's the problem, you might say? You've got the maps. Well, no, I don't, because I haven't paid for them, so I can't access that content. But that space has been taken up off my hard drive. So essentially, I've got two choices. I either uninstall the whole game completely to free up that hard drive space that's been taken away from me, or I actually go out and purchase either the season pass or those maps to access the content that has now been forcibly installed on my hard drive. That's holding my hard drive space to ransom. Now, I'm not talking about a couple of 100 meg here. That patch was about 8 gig. So yeah, just think about that. I mean, think about, say you had 10 games and the map packs were 8-9 gig each. So you're going to lose 80 to 90 gig off your hard drive with content that you can't access.
We reach the silo's floor.
And the only way to access it is to pay for it.
Coalescence.
No. Not having that. And it's not just Black Ops 3 that have done this either. This happened with Dying Light. Now, originally this DLC for Dying Light was supposed to be free. Then they decided to do something more with it and charge people for it. But that content is now sat on my hard drive on my PlayStation 4. I can't access it. I've got to either buy the season pass or I've got to buy the DLC. So that's more hard drive space lost. And I object to this. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't see why it's acceptable to have vast chunks of your hard drive space lost to DLC. I don't see how it's right that this stuff can be held to ransom while your only options are to pay for the content, or if you wish to free up that hard drive space, you have to delete the whole thing. Now, yeah, obviously if you don't have your console connected online, then you don't have the updates, but then you're stuck with a broken game. And see what I was saying earlier about all of that. And then if you take it another way, you're kind of between the devil and the deep blue sea, because increasingly more games now require you to be online, even in the single player element, because they incorporate really crappy things in it, like leaderboards and online challenges that infest the game. So we've been bent over a barrel. If you think back to when Sony and Microsoft unveiled the PS4 and the Xbox One back at E3, or was it like 2.5 years ago now? The whole hullabaloo that came out of that, Microsoft said, hey, look, this console needs to connect online once a day to verify games, but you don't need the disc. You can install a game, put the disc on the shelf, you never need to put the disc back in the console. You can also share entire games with people, blah, blah, blah. The whole announcement was kind of confusing because they really seem very non-committal on key things like game trade-ins and just how do things work. They're all like, well, we'll reveal that at a later date. In other words, they had an idea, but they had no idea how it was going to work or go down. And it went down like a lead balloon, especially when Sony came on stage and said, hey, yeah, you can play our console offline. You can just swap games with people. This is how you do it. And they did that whole little funny skit, where they just went, hey, here's this game. And they're like, oh, thank you. And yeah, you can trade in your games and all of that stuff. Not exactly turned out that way when you think about it, because the power of whether the console needs to be online or not to play games actually lies with the game developers and publishers. It seems that the console manufacturers, be it Sony or Microsoft, have bowed down to that pressure, rather than turning around and both saying no, because that actually is in direct contradiction to what the idea of having a games console is all about. They've not done that. Well, here's the thing. Publishers, developers, you can piss off, okay? Because I'm getting really, really tired of this. I'm getting really tired of the crap way this industry is being run. I'm tired of the way that publishers, developers lie to their consumers, especially the pathetic ass reasons they give for why they put something in a game that's really unpopular. The kind of excuses they come out with, how integral something is to something, or why this game needs to be online all the time, and yet somebody comes along within minutes on the PC and patches it and the game works fine offline. These type of fucking lies. It's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. There's no need for it. We should not be accepting this. We should not be taking this. We should be calling them out. We should be saying, this is bullshit. I don't believe what you're saying. And unless you do something about it, we're done. Okay. Gamers, we need to stop being concerned that they're not going to make games anymore. We need to stop being frightened by that. That's never going to happen. Okay. They're not going to willingly put themselves out of business. But more importantly, game publishers and developers, you need to start listening to your client base. Because at the moment you're acting like utter dicks and you're pumping broken shit out all the time with the feeblest of excuses. I am sick and tired of seeing games when you go to play online and the online multiplayer and the servers go down and they go, it was due to unexpected server demand. Right, well, sack your fucking marketing department then, that you pay a ridiculous amount of money for, because if they couldn't predict with any degree of accuracy the kind of demand that was going to be due to the sales of product, a clue is your pre-orders, by the way, you need to get rid of them. You're supposed to be offering a service and a product. If you can't do either, get out of the industry. You're not going to be missed, believe it or not. There's always somebody else that's going to come in and take your place. No one gives a shit about the game companies that have gone, that were offering crap services. We only care about those companies that went, who were doing something really good, usually because they get bought out by a bigger company, EA, and then disbanded. So that's it. It's time for the games industry to wake up, because the AAA market is in an absolute mess, and it's going to get worse. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.